Hey friends, this is Pop Culture Makes Me Jealous, where we analyze pop culture through the lens of race or gender, and sometimes both. I'm your host, Julia Washington, and on today's show, we're getting into the 4-part Beckham docu-series. On October 4th, 2023, Netflix released a 4-episode limited series of David Beckham's spectacular and sudden rise to fame in the football world and becoming an international superstar. With never-before-seen footage and vulnerable interviews from David himself, Victoria, and former teammates, director Fisher Stevens gives us an intimate and honest look that we didn't know we needed of David Beckham, giving context to criticism and refocusing the narrative of this star to a human level. My guest, Mario from Movies with Mr. Mario on Instagram, and I discussed what we thought of the series overall and what was the most surprising to learn. And now, here we go to the show. What are your overall thoughts about the Beckham docu-series, Mario?
It was really good. Very emotional.
It was so emotional.
Like episode 2 broke me. I was like crying. I was like, oh my gosh, like but even my roommate was watching it and he was really into it and he was like, dang, that documentary is actually pretty like action packed. There's a lot going on in that. And I was like,
Who would have thought
we don't even
Fisher?
know.
Yeah, who would have thought Fisher Stevens had it in him? Like, I had no idea. Like, does he make documentaries all the
Right?
time? Because dang, sir.
Yeah, I recognized the voice when he first started talking. I was like, I think it's that guy. I forgot his name. I was like, it's that guy from Early Edition.
Yes.
And then I searched it up and I was like, it is that guy. I was like, oh yeah, his name's Fisher Stevens.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I was like, oh, that's random. Like, I didn't know he made stuff like that.
Neither did I. So random. Good for you, Fisher Stevens, who will always be known as the guy from Early Edition.
But yeah, no, it was really good. It was very I learned a lot. Um I was a kid when a lot of that happened, so
Mm-hmm.
like I really didn't become a big fan of Beckham until like I was late in high school or at high school.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's when he was like playing for LA and all that stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
because his timeline, I didn't realize his timeline. Like,
yeah, I didn't either. I was like, dang, I was alive, but I was a
yeah.
kid when all that was happening.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, because I spoiler alerts, everyone, if you haven't watched the show, but I
Yeah.
mean it happened in real life, so
Yeah.
but there were still some surprises because there's just a lot of stuff I didn't know. But I do remember the scandal of the um, possible cheating affair. I remember that.
I had no idea. That
Yeah,
was news to me when I was watching it. I was
yeah,
like, wait, what happened? Like, I
yeah. I remember
literally
seeing it
had
on
no
the
idea.
news or whatever, and that was like kind of like my first brush, I guess, with the Beckhams. I mean, I knew like
Mhm.
I knew Posh Spice because I knew the Spice Girls and
Right.
I had listened to them, but I was like, oh, but yeah, that was so it was interesting to see how it unfolded and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, I thought the docuseries was very well done. I thought the timing and the pacing was done really well too. Like nothing felt rushed. Like I felt like we had plenty of background information when he was younger and leading up to joining Manchester United. I also felt like they did a really good job at balancing how, like, once Victoria shows up into the picture, balancing like his relationship with Victoria and then his relationship with soccer. Like,
mhm,
I didn't walk away from this feeling like I wanted more. Like you said, like I learned so much that I didn't know because
mhm.
I was a kid too. We were both, I think a little too young for some of like the real like hot gossipy stuff.
Yeah,
especially because like soccer doesn't really have a chokehold on the US the way it does the rest of the
Yeah.
world.
And what's funny is, so we talked about Ted Lasso on your show many
Mm-hmm.
times, and I
Mm-hmm.
was like, I know some of this like dialogue
Yes.
and the terms. I was like, thank you, Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
Like I know what you guys are talking about.
Right.
But like when they were talking about how the European fans and like the rest of the world are so into it compared to America. It brought up the scene in Ted Lasso when Rebecca's at like in season 3 when Rebecca's in the boardroom with all the club members
Mm-hmm.
or the
Mm-hmm.
CEOs, and she's like, "What the f you doing? Like, why would we take that away from people? Like, people have grown on this. Like, this is their lives and stuff."
Right.
And then just seeing like the footage of them like people like crying and happy like when they would win or they would lose, like it was
Mm-hmm.
the end of the world, like, and to see how mad they would get, like we saw some of that in Ted Lasso, like when they would be losing, like how mad these fans would get, but to see like actual footage from back then when he was
Mm-hmm.
playing, like I was just like, dang, that really does put it into perspective on how passionate these fans are and how important that game is. So it was really cool callback to like Ted Lasso about, they got it right in the show. So
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
and then even like when they were talking about the LA in the fourth episode, he was like, America is not as big as into it is, and hopefully, like him coming over to us, like that will help change that. And I think it's gotten better. I know plenty of like stars now that that are playing for America, and I could tell you a couple on like one hand, but
Yeah, I still can't. I mean, I know Megan Rapinoe, right? Like
yeah,
she's a soccer player. I think it was really interesting to get the reminder because I think from what I can remember in America, it was always like Posh Spice's hut. Like he was a model.
hmm
He was like a different kind of star. And again, we were kids. So
yeah,
okay, now we're moving into how much did we know about Posh and Bex before this series started, right?
yes,
So, like, for me, it was like, you're a model. You're the hot guy on the cover of a magazine. You're married to Posh Spice. Going back to Ted Lasso, there's that line in Ted Lasso where Roy is like so mad that Jamie's just kind of whatever. And he's like, just because God kissed your right foot. And I was like, feel like when I was watching this docu-series is like I feel like somebody said that about Bex too. Like God
hmm
kissed his right foot is like the chosen foot in soccer or whatever. Um but it really like brought to light just how much of a huge star he is
hmm
internationally for more than just being like a pretty tattooed face.
yeah. And then I liked how like it kind of got into how he kind of got into modeling and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
um, even I think it was an episode. It was in episode 4 too. Was when she was gonna have a C-section. She was
Mm-hmm.
scheduled, and he had to go be on a red carpet for an event at the same time. And he's like, "Well,
With
I'm sorry, that's not gonna." With
the
J Lo and Beyonce,
yes, I was like, that's a very important factor.
which I think that was during their Pepsi ad, right?
I think
Because
so,
I
yeah.
saw the Pepsi in the back. I was like, I remember them doing Pepsi commercials, or like they did a whole line of Pepsi products
Mm-hmm.
with them because it was like for like I think it was for the World Cup or the Super Bowl. It was for a big
Right.
event, but I remember that as a kid, like those ads. So I was just like, oh, that's what it was. But I mean, still, it sucks that he wasn't there. But
Yeah, and I totally empathize with Posh, who, by the way, is like a standard of beauty that is super unachievable. But still, it kind of also highlights too just how hard it is to be a woman pregnant because here she is not feeling great about her body and the way she feels because it sucks being pregnant. At the end, like some people don't have issues, but at the end, it's like you're carrying around a bowling ball that's
yeah,
causing pressure on your body. Like you can't always feel good about yourself. And here he is standing with two women who are like arguably two of the most beautiful women in the world.
yeah,
Posh, I appreciate you saying that you're mad because I would have
yes.
been too.
And that's what I liked about it because they were both very honest, and like
Mm-hmm.
David Beckham, I feel like was very
Mm-hmm.
humble, like throughout the whole thing. He came from like the poor side of family, and
Mm-hmm.
then it was funny because like in the first episode, Posh was like, "Oh yeah, we were working class," and then he pops in, he's like, "Tell the truth,
Yeah.
tell the truth." My dad drove a Rolls Royce. Like,
Yeah.
but it was like him keeping her humble too. Like, yes,
Yeah.
you had some cool stuff, but be honest. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but I really do. I think it gave me more appreciation for them too, because I've always been a fan ever since, just learning about them growing up and stuff. And I loved Posh and Spice Girls, and I liked him as a star and stuff. They were always I always related it to their style too. They always were
Mm-hmm.
so fancy and stylish. And I remember like like um watching them at like the royal weddings and stuff. Like they
Mm-hmm.
would always appear in like, yeah, a top hat, and I was just like, they're so stylish, they're so pretty,
Mm-hmm.
like I love them, and like they're so in love and
Yeah.
all this stuff.
I loved just like their willingness to be vulnerable too.
Hmm.
Like there were multiple times where Posh was just like, all right, I haven't even thought about this. And I can't believe you're getting me to say this, Fisher. And then just go into something where you're just like, dang, like, thank you for sharing. That was a big vulnerability. And I appreciate you being so honest about it.
Hmm.
And not just like the whole like Beckham having a photo shoot stuff, but just like when he was in Madrid and how hard that was on her and the family, and like just how much she was completely honest about how much she hated it there. I mean,
Hmm.
good for you, girl, for being honest about it, because that's got to be hard. Because it did kind of feel like they were very not protective of their image, but very aware that they had a high profile. So like
Hmm.
so it's like even though they would do interviews and stuff and they were charming in interviews and what have you, it still felt like they were managing their reputation, but not in
Hmm.
like a gross way. Like they're not hiding anything. They didn't turn out to be horrible people. They're
Hmm.
managing their reputation for their own like mental health and wellness.
And then especially with the kid, when the kids got involved, it was like they go into it. I think that was episode 2 or 3 where they talk about they were getting death threats from Brooklyn and stuff, or
Yeah.
like kidnap, like we're gonna kidnap your kid. Like as a parent, I could imagine that's super scary. And then especially you're in a whole different city you're not used to or
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And I want to kind of go back to the Real Madrid when he went there because like Victoria, they didn't she didn't move right away. He was there alone for a good, was it like 6 months, 8 months?
Something like that.
So,
Yeah.
and he kind of talked about how like he was used to, all right, after practice I go home, after the game I go home to my family. Like, but he went home to himself by
Mm-hmm.
himself, and that took a toll on him. And it was interesting because they were talking about like um, his teammates and that even though there was a language barrier, like his teammates like were able to like communicate through gestures
Mm-hmm.
and still have a laugh and all that stuff. So it was like I think his teammates like understood like like he wasn't himself because his family wasn't there. And I think
Yeah.
they did a good job portraying like, yeah, we're teammates but we're also family, like we look out for each other and stuff. So I thought that was really cool too, like them stepping up to the plate and stuff about that.
Yeah, for sure. Back to the vulnerability, how honest they were about what it was like for them being separated and how hard it was in their relationship. And I think one of the things that really struck me was just how awful the media was being towards Victoria specifically, because
Hmm.
she wasn't with him and taking forever to get there. But like I use taking forever to in air quotes because she had a very good point of like, I've got kids I have to figure out how to put in school in a different country. Like that's
Yeah.
not easy. And I think too, like we just kind of assume that rich people, I mean, in some respects, rich people do have it a lot easier, but in this respect, it was a reminder that we're all still in sort of a similar playing field when it comes to relocating. Like, if you have to
Hmm.
move, you still have to figure out what you're going to do with your kids, what school you're going to go to, and, the language barrier. It won't be as hard on the kids because kids are sponges and learn language faster, and like all
Hmm.
these different variables that she had to like consider. And David didn't have to consider. He was just like, cool, I'm going to play, I'm going to make a ton of money, hurry up and get here. Oh, you're not here yet. I'm super lonely. So like they were both dealing with their challenges with this relocation, and it was like straining their relationship. And that's
Hmm.
hard. And then on couple that with like the way the media was portraying them, like I'm shocked that they're still married after watching this,
Right?
because like there's so many hurdles that they had to go through that Victoria could have said, you know what, David, this isn't worth it anymore. I'm done with you.
Yeah.
Like, bye. I'm
But
going
that just shows how much they loved each other to like push through, and that's why I think I respect them even more because
yes.
I I thought the same thing. Was like, man, like I don't know if I could like hang on that long. Like we're separated for so long, and then all of a sudden I'm getting, reading that, oh, you might have had an affair, or
Mm-hmm.
and all this stuff, and the media just keeps hounding you. Like I wouldn't want that all the time. Like they showed the video of them in the car with the kids, and the kids were freaking out because all the fans were like tapping on the windows, and the
And
mom's
that's
like,
scary because you don't understand that your parents are famous.
yeah, so it's like I would have been like, I can't do this anymore, like, bye. But like
Yeah.
she pushed through it and he pushed through it, and I mean they weren't perfect, but they
Mm-mm.
worked it out and they kept it going, and they're still married to this day, which is beautiful. And I was like, that's why I
I
think I have a new respect for them because I'm just like,
absolutely the
dang.
same, because I felt like they were so young when they got together, so young when they got together, and it felt like to me they were choosing to grow together even in the times when they were growing apart.
Hmm.
And I just think that's so incredible because not a lot of people have the strength to do, or can find the strength to do it. They might have the strength, but they can't find it necessarily. It's like they knew it was going to be temporary, where some situations in relationships that are really bad, it's like, that's not temporary, girl, get out. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? But like every single time with them, it felt like this is a temporary situation. We got to get through it. It's hard now. We got to get through it. Okay, so I want to move into what we found to be the like surprising facts that we learned that we didn't know before. And I think for me, the biggest surprise was realizing how young David was when he joined Manchester United. 17.
Right?
I had no idea.
He's been playing soccer his whole life.
His
Like,
whole life. And okay, so I kind of vaguely remember the World Cup hate, like the
mhm,
1998, like because World Cup does
play around here.
yeah, and it did penetrate through the US because it's, kind of like it's the World Cup. I didn't realize how young he was when all of that was going on. So when they were talking about that, and then like with Posh Spice telling him like, oh, by the way, I'm pregnant the day before the game, like, and she's also really young, so like I understand the need and desire to tell him like ASAP, but I also understand how that was probably a bad idea, and if they had been just a handful of years older, she might have waited, and then it could, then all these things maybe like landed differently. But it also reminded me, do you remember a couple years ago when Simone Biles was like, I got to bow out of the Olympics because my mental health is not good?
Hmm.
It made me think of like just the pressure that is placed on professional athletes when they're that young, and
Hmm.
how hard it is for them, and like truly the lack of support. Because, I mean, how many years did he spend essentially in publicity exile because of this? Like the country
Hmm.
legitimately hated him.
And I mean, to top it off, like, yeah, the pressure, but he's also a guy who's been taught not to share his emotions because back then it
Right.
was your masculinity and all that stuff. So yeah, and that was episode two, and like I said, that episode broke me. I was like crying through almost the whole episode because I was just like, oh my gosh, the stuff he had to go through, like going out into the field and just hearing everyone boo him, and
Because you like it's
um,
your job. It's your job to
right,
play soccer,
and you have to
literally.
go out there, like you can't not go, like
Yeah.
so. And then the thing where the guy hung the dummy out the window of him hanging,
Yeah.
and it was the Beckham shirt. I was just like, oh my gosh. I'm like, really?
That was so intense. That was so like that was just like, first of all, if that happened in the States, it would have had a
Oh yeah.
completely different outcome.
Oh yeah.
But it just was so unnecessarily cruel.
Yeah. And then he was talking about like how because Posh was on tour at the same time, like he didn't have really anybody to lean on.
Mm-hmm.
Like once, like they would see each other every once in a while, but at that time it was like, again, he was facing loneliness. And then he kind of almost broke down at the present time retelling that story because it was just
Mm-hmm.
like I was very depressed. Like I didn't know what to do. And then like even hearing his mom like, "Oh, you hate going to those stadiums," like hearing of them cheer bad about your son and it breaks a mother's heart. And I was just like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, like
When she was like, this person is on my list
right,
because they said blah 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 about my kid. I was like, Queen, yes, that is exactly the
right."
response a mom should have.
So, yeah, it was that was probably one of the things I didn't know. Like I didn't follow sports back then, so I didn't really understand like what was going on. So
Mm-hmm.
to watch that and to see the footage and stuff and I was just like, oh my gosh, I felt so bad for him. I was like
Mm-hmm.
one little mistake and it's just like that's what he was known for a couple years and I was just
Years.
like oh. But it was so beautiful at the end though, like at the end of the episode 2. Um because it goes back to the beginning. He talks about how his father Ted was always drilling him on his soccer drills and like
Mm-hmm.
doing the corner shot, and he said he would have to do it hundreds and hundreds of times. And then it was so beautiful because it was like he had finally had the ball in this last game, and he's like, I have to take the corner shot. And what did he do when he was growing up? And it was just like that whole moment came full circle, and he won, helped win that game, and his like whole image changed again. And it was just like
Mm-hmm.
I was like crying. I was like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful because it was like it kept like flashing back to when he was playing with his dad and stuff and how it went. I was like, oh my gosh, it's so good. Like,
Yeah.
but
But what
yeah,
an
just
emotional roller coaster, though,
right.
to like be so beloved since you were 17 to being the most hated back to being the most beloved. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then I remember his friend said like we had to take turns walking him to the bathroom because you never knew what was gonna happen if he was gonna get jumped or what. So it's like
Right.
we each took turns going to the bathroom with him just to make sure he was safe. I was like, oh my gosh.
So
Like
bonkers
that's
to
so
me.
crazy.
That's so bonkers to me. Another thing that was like, oh, surprise, like I'm surprised to learn this was the kidnapping threats of their
Right?
kid.
I'm like,
Like
who does that?
it's
Really?
like it's like that to me is like a different kind of sickness in the head because what is the
Yeah.
celebrity gonna do? Like they're just as like their kids
Yeah, that was heartbreaking too, because I was just like, as a parent, how do you deal with that? Like
and you're high
watch your
pro
kid like a hawk.
yeah, because
Like,
you're high profile too. So people like you play for a sport, so people are gonna know what city you're in
yeah.
for however many games there are a season.
I'm like, who do you actually really trust now? Like
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's bonkers. What about you? Did you have any like shocking things that you were like, I had no idea?
probably I think just how bad the whole um, bashing him was,
Mm-hmm.
like just how bad it got, and like how much it took an emotional toll on him and stuff. I just yeah, that just like was devastating to me. So that was something I didn't know. So I was
Yeah.
just like, I'm like everyone loves David Beckham. Where's this coming from?
I also didn't know that he went to Real Madrid to play. That wasn't
Mm.
something that was in my knowledge bank. And why would it? I don't pay attention to soccer.
But it was weird how he got there. I didn't know he got the boot. Like they were
Yeah.
like the guy in Manchester was just like, I'm not taking his calls. I'm not doing this. Like he's out.
Yeah.
Like he found out by didn't he find out by like a newspaper ad or something? I can't.
I
Isn't that
think
how
so.
that's
Something
how
like
it happened?
completely random. Yeah. And then so he took an interview and then so he took an interview with the owner of Real Madrid, which just sort of exacerbated the situation with Manchester.
Yeah,
Because Manchester was like, "Oh, okay, that's what you're doing then. Bye." Like, and
yeah,
he was like, "You already said bye.
yeah.
Like, you already told me to get out.
Well,
I
and
was
then that
trying to
happens.
find another job."
And then that happens again when he was talking to the LA Galaxy, and then Real
Mm-hmm.
Madrid finds out they were offended, so
Yeah.
you're not playing anymore. And then he had to finish his contract, but he just sat there. Like I
Yeah.
was just like, oh my gosh, that's horrible too.
So petty. So petty. I didn't realize how hard of a worker he was. And so what I thought was really compelling about the being benched at Real Madrid was how he still trained. He didn't just like accept being benched and then like stay there and let himself sort of get rusty. He still was like training and doing everything that he needed to do to stay sharp, because it could have been really easy for him to be like, I guess I'm on the bench, and then show up to Galaxy super rusty.
Yeah.
And then it was almost kind of poetic in a way for them to be like, no, but you want to stay. We want you to stay now because we see you are hard work. Your team wants you to be able to play, so we'll let you play. And then he does well, and they're like, no, but stay. And he's like, no, you benched me. I'm still
Yeah.
leaving.
Hmm.
Like, who's to say that your
You're gonna do
mood
it
isn't
again.
gonna change again, right? Like, you love me now, but will you love me tomorrow?
Yeah.
I also didn't realize how bad the LA Galaxy was.
Mm.
Watching that footage was painful. Those games were so hard to watch. Like, going from watching Manchester United games, you know, from him doing World Cup footage, from being in Real Madrid, and just seeing this like intense sport that's just like boom, 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 like super high athleticism, to watching LA Galaxy in 2007. And you're just like, I feel like there's high school kids that are better. What? And you could just see the look on his face on the sidelines of like, what have I done?
Yeah. But I mean, that just kind of shows like how important our sport soccer was over here, I guess.
Yeah. Because we're
Like that's
very,
their whole life over there, but here it's just
mm-hmm.
like, eh.
And I agree with you. I do think he helped sort of break down that barrier to make it more professionally acceptable. Because I
Hmm.
don't know about you, but in my area, it was like everybody I went to school with did it's not called little league soccer, but essentially it's little league soccer.
Hmm.
So I don't know where the disconnect is between this forced participation in little league travel soccer to such a weak professional level soccer represent like level in 2007. Like it doesn't really make sense to me, considering I probably was the only person in my school when I was in elementary school who didn't play soccer.
We lived in the country, or well, I didn't live in the country. I went to school in the country, so that's like what everyone played. And then high school, um, our school was like probably like 75% Mexican, so that's what everyone played was soccer.
Yeah, yeah.
I think I played soccer for like one year, and then I
Mm.
broke my ankle playing, so then I didn't play
You're like, I'm out. It's dangerous.
again.
I don't want to
Yeah,
do this anymore.
yeah. So, but then when he went to, it was funny because then when he was going to the LA Galaxy, they had that news footage of Tom Cruise sitting with Victoria, and they're like, "Oh, Tom Cruise is going to be their future neighbor." Like they're moving into his neighborhood. I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's like a funny." I was like, "That's right," because they're going to be in LA. I was like, "Oh."
Because, you know, Tom Cruise likes to recruit for Scientology, but he's super
Hmm.
on the DL about it, but he's not. You know what I mean? And so my friend and I were talking, and oh, there's another thing I didn't realize about him. He is deeply religious in a way. He not like necessarily he goes to church all the time, but what like a lot of his tattoos, and we're gonna have,
Spirituality.
and my friend Andleeb is gonna come on and do is like a breakdown of his
Hmm.
tattooography. I just
Oh,
coined a
nice.
word. I don't know if it's real. It might already exist. And she was commenting about how a lot of his tattoos have a lot of religious meaning. Let's cut actually to that right now so Ann Lieb can share with us a little bit more about his tattooography, and then we can give you that conversation, and then we'll be right back. We both watched the David Beckham docu-series, and we texted
It
about
was
it,
amazing.
as we do, because we are friends who love TV. But
Yes.
I need you to give us the tattoo timeline breakdown, because you tracked it way better than I did. And I was getting more and more curious as you were texting me. And then I was like, I'm not dedicated enough to pay attention. I'm going to rely on my friend.
All right. So what I noticed is that Bex didn't get his first tattoo until he was like 23. He has a total of 60 tattoos, and now I went down a rabbit hole of his tattoos, and there's actually an article that I'll send you a link to.
Perfect.
So of his tattoos, the one thing that the article mentioned, and I'll intersperse it with what I noticed, is that everything on his body is balanced, and it's very thematic. So it's not, oh, here's something Greek, and then here's a pretzel, and here's this or whatever. It's all, and there's a lot of religious underlinings, which I didn't expect at all. So he has a bunch of cherubs, for instance. His chest has 3 cherubs that are lifting Jesus from his tomb. And so what he said is that it's akin to, he's thinking about when he dies and his three boys will carry him to his grave, right? Goosebumps.
I'm like gonna cry.
I know. And then he's got he has this angel tattooed on his back, and that was actually the first one that I noticed when he was with Manchester United. So as like 2003, so he was 23, and that's when I was like, ooh, first one. But what I didn't realize is until later he added all 3 of his boys' names. So of the most curious one is Brooklyn. His firstborn is a tramp stamp. I don't know. Tramp stamp, and then the top of the angel is Romeo, and then the bottom of the angel is Cruz. So I'm like, it's cool about Romeo and Cruz, but why is Brooklyn a tramp stamp?
I don't know. I mean, he was 23, right?
But the thing is, the names weren't added until after Cruz was born, which was the Real Madrid days.
Right, which is like 2005 era.
So, yeah, so this is like really thought about of how to make my child a tramp stamp. And I'm going to keep saying that because it's annoying. He does have one tattoo. He has one tattoo that I don't understand, and it's a ship in his armpit.
Huh.
His daughter Harper is on his neck.
So cute.
He also has angels on both of his shoulders, and the right angel has written on it, "In the face of adversity." So here's what's really cool. He has a tattoo it's Roman numerals, for May 8th, 2006, but they're Latin words underneath that say "De Integro," which means it's a start of a new beginning. And if you align the timeline, because Real Madrid really was real problematic for Posh and Beck. So, and that's where a lot of his tattoos emerged. And that's what I was thinking. That's when I texted you. I was like, I think everything kind of came up during that time he was in Madrid because he was missing his family so much. And when you're missing somebody, why not get a tattoo?
Yeah, so, and it's a great deflection to get a tattoo too.
Yeah, and and I feel like that's when, they made that decision to leave Madrid and go to LA. She's hella happy. He's okay. But the whole, to start something new. And that was that journey of, moving forward. So the one thing that sidebar note, I did not notice at all, even through his Galaxy days, was tattoos on his legs. So there's a whole section in this article of leg tattoos, and he has a lion and some cherubs and some birds. But all of that happened post Galaxy days.
Interesting.
So he was only on Galaxy for like 5 years. And
yeah,
then
it wasn't very long.
Then he retired and he went to Paris. Right. And he was, really retiring because he was old. And he just couldn't keep up with the kids anymore. So yes, this was just the continuity of the religious undertones, the angels, there was a lot of Latin writing on him. The one non-Latin written thing is in Sanskrit, and it's Victoria's name on his arm. So that was when he was at Manchester. So again,
I love that.
I did not know I needed to know this information, but I am here to share it with everybody.
I love it. I love it. The religious themes of his tattoos kind of make it very easy to understand why maybe he didn't latch on to the Tom Cruise attempt to indoctrination for Scientology.
Oh God, I didn't even think about that. Yeah. I mean, did Tom and Will know about his cherub tattoos when they threw him that big ass party in LA?
Right.
He doesn't have any tattoos on his belly. He keeps that clean.
Hmm.
And then there was some other place on his face, or like his face and his belly are the only two places that he keeps it clean. So there's like his chest has like an evenly tattoo across of it, and whatever. And he does have one tattoo going down the side, and I think it said it's in Japanese or Chinese, but it says "I love you, mom and dad."
Cute.
Yeah. So yes, this was a deep dive I needed today. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I love it. Andleeb, thank you so much for being our David Beckham tattoo correspondent for this episode. I am so thrilled that you were willing to take the assignment.
Yeah, I do have a tattoo. It does say calm, strong, and determined. So I was very calm in my research. I was strong and determined to get through all 60 tattoos.
Yes.
I'm here for you.
I think that's what kind of inspired me to do tattoos. Now that I think about it,
Really?
was like he looks cool in tattoos. Because after high school, I was a big David Beckham fan. I think this is when he went to Alec Galaxy, and I remember following him a little bit before then and stuff, and seeing him at their weddings and all that stuff. But I was just like, oh, they're so pretty, and I just became a fan of him. I remember I got his cologne because it was like a Target exclusive.
Oh my gosh.
So I remember getting this cologne, and it was my favorite cologne. I would always wear it, and my friends would make fun of me because I'd always talk about David Beckham and his new merchandise that come out. I remember I worked at Burlington and Manteca, and they got a whole line of David Beckham stuff. So it was like shirts and shorts and
you're like sold.
Shoes.
Here's my paycheck.
Yeah, I bought the shoes. I bought the shirt. I was like, I'm sporting these David Beckham.
Yeah.
Just because I thought he was just the coolest guy, and I was just like, I want to meet him one day.
He was really smart to do things outside of soccer. Like that's a really smart move. And because the appeal was there, I don't think out of all the people that they interviewed for the docu-series, there was maybe like two others. I was like, oh, I know that name. And then when they showed the footage from 25 years ago, it's like, oh yeah, I definitely know who that is. But like, I know that opportunity isn't always available to like other professional athletes, but like as much as it bothered like his coaches and stuff that he was like this uber celebrity married to Posh Spice, I still think it was a really smart move because he could have gotten injured at any moment. And then what? I think he only had like one injury that they talked about in the series.
Yeah.
Which is just, I'm shocked by that because, in baseball, pitchers are injured. The wear and tear happens sometimes before they even get into the major leagues.
Yeah.
Basketball players are constantly getting knocked over. I swear football players are horribly injured before they even get to professional league as well.
Right. Yeah, I thought it was funny though too because he was like, I'm retiring, and he left the LA Galaxy, then went back and played for France for a year, and then at the end she was like, I saw him and he was kind of limping, and you could tell we had that look in her eyes, and she was like, I looked at him and you could tell what I was thinking, but I was like, you're done. Like, this is it. You got to be done.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh.
And then the day after he retires from there, he was like, guess what? I have a soccer league.
Yes.
Like he cannot rest on his laurels.
But I think that suits him. I think he knows the game. He's been playing for years, and then it's in America, so I'm sure Victoria's loving it and stuff.
Yeah.
And then he got another great player was Leo Messi on there, who's a great player. So that was awesome. But yeah, so I think it suits him. And he was like, oh, I chose it all pink, and I was like,
yeah.
I dig it.
I love that. I love how okay, here's the thing that I love the most about David Beckham. I love that like even though he presents as this really strong, burly man, he is definitely like the dad who's like, let's have a cuddle, huddle, snuggle. Like everyone pile on the couch. We're all gonna like snuggle each other. Where's the blankets? Like he's got this really great soft side that a lot of like rugged professional athletes don't show.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that with this docu-series, you really got to see more of that side. But really, when you saw him in the footage with his kids, he's always holding his kids' hands. Like, he brought, I think it's Brooklyn on field with him when they'd walk onto the field. Like, he is so family centric, which is kind of what makes the whole like cruise cesarean thing even more awful, because it's like, I felt like if he didn't have that obligation, because it's probably contractual, because then what happens if you break that contract and you don't go, which whatever, people can debate that, but like it just seeing him in the end in episode 4 with his kids and just being this one big family, like it is very clear that, like, to me, David and Victoria were like parents first,
Yeah.
which is felt like part of the reason why she was so pissed about like going to Spain and like how hard it was to go to Spain and then immediately relocating to the US and then relocating again. And it's just like, she's like, pick a place for us to settle so we can raise our kids, because that's the focus. Like, that's the point. But I just love that he wasn't afraid to be like, because he does look intimidating when he's doing his like scowl. But then he's like, kissing his kids, and you're just like, that's so sweet. Like, yes,
Yeah.
more men should kiss their children.
Well, I remember this was a few years ago after Harper was born and when she was a toddler. Like, he had Instagrammed him kissing her on the lips, but she was like 2 years old, 3 years old, and it was this big old thing like men shouldn't be kissing girls like that and all this stuff, and it was just big old, like, people blew it out of proportion. And he
Yeah.
responded, he's like, "She's my daughter.
Yeah.
Like, we show affection in our house. Like,
Yeah.
nothing creepy." He's like, "So I'm sorry if I offended you," kind of thing. But I
Yeah.
was,
Which is upsetting, because I think when a man wants to actually be like a decent dad, an affectionate father, someone who isn't afraid to show emotion that is more than just anger, shouldn't be admonished. It should be praised, because that's not the norm.
yeah,
Like, the expectation is not that. So when someone wants to step outside of that norm, they
it's a
they
big
get
deal.
bashed. Yeah, it's not okay. It's not okay. It makes me cranky.
They're really good people, and like I said, I think this whole docu series gave me a newfound respect for them, and
Mm-hmm.
just made me love them even more. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it shows like how much they went through and stuff. So I
Yeah.
recommend the series to everybody that you know knows knows the name Beckham and Posh, and just
Mm-hmm.
to it's interesting. It's super interesting.
They
Like
really
I
give a
said.
lot of context to some of the
hmm
stuff that like we thought we knew, and then they're like, you don't know shit.
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm not a big documentary fan, like because I feel like it's a lot of just like speaking facts and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. But
Mm-hmm.
I was like, if Dave Beckham, we're gonna watch it. So, and
Yeah.
I was enthralled the whole time, and just like it wasn't boring. It was so interesting. Like I said, episode 2 made me like tear up and cry. Like I was just like, so to do that, it's like really good. And
Yeah.
I was very pleased at the end.
Yeah. It was interesting too that they brought in those paparazzi guys to talk to them,
hmm
and get a little bit more insight about, because those guys made a ton of money off of David Beckham and Victoria, which is true for all paparazzi types, right? Like, that's just the norm. Some are a little bit more aggressive than others, obviously, which is really gross. At the same time, like, not as a society, we have a ton of people whose needs aren't getting met, so they're doing whatever they can to get their
hmm
needs met, and this is one of those ways.
I think paparazzi back then was way different than it is now, though, too.
Honestly, I think it was worse.
Yeah, oh
So,
yeah. Because I
because
mean, you have to think we didn't have social media. The internet was still fairly new, so it was like
and
it was newspaper. So it was like you had to be the one to get that picture so you could be on the front page. So
and those
people did
guys even
whatever.
yeah, and those guys even, because there was something specific that happened, and I'm going to go back and rewatch the series to pull it specifically, because I meant to write it down when it was happening and I forgot. But something specifically happened, and Fisher asked those two guys like about the situation, and one of them flat out said, yeah, nowadays we would never do that. We would never get that close to take a photo. We would never like encroach that way, or something to that effect. I'll find it and do a playback here, but like, that to me was also really like, dang, like even these like guys who've basically their entire livelihood is paparazzi photos are starting to recognize the error of their ways from 30 years ago. And I was like, thank God, because maybe more and more people will start being a little bit more respectful. And then I got to thinking, like, okay, so how long have we had the term paparazzi? And like, how long has this sort of like craze, specifically in England, been going on? And I found a Times article where that it was from 1961 where they had to explain to their readers what the paparazzi was, and it was already kind of in circulation. The word was in use already a little bit at that time. It was still new. It was so new that they had explained what it was because it was like coming up often. And then I found a bunch of other articles that like really track the timeline. So it's like of like the obsession with paparazzi and like royalty specifically, because we all know the tragedy of Diana.
Mm-hmm.
It really is the late 50s, early 60s where it starts to become like a pretty awful thing. Or it's like not awful. It's really starts to become like its genesis where it's like, and then people there's no real rules, there's no boundaries, there's no regulation for it because it sells papers and we need to sell papers so we can stay in business and all these things. Every article that I found was essentially like, since Diana's death, da 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 da. So even though it's still pretty bad for some people, there is a level of like dialed backness because there have been a lot of lawsuits, not just from royalty, but like I found a lawsuit that Amy Winehouse did about paparazzi invading her privacy and her space. And so it's particularly awful in England. But in England, there's like a little bit of a different recourse. Like when they talked about how David Beckham tried to sue, I forget which publication here in the States, he lost because of something that they had said. I forget specifically what it was. And in England, based on everything I found, it sounded like he could have probably won that if they were in the UK because of all the precedent that had been happening. We have the First Amendment, which a lot of people lean on when it comes to press in like in free speech and all that stuff. So he sues this publication and the judge is like, well, actually you lose. Because of we have freedom of speech here, so sorry. And so that got me thinking like how hard it's got to be from another culture where there is recourse when someone says something awful about you versus the US where you can literally say anything about anybody and it doesn't matter. Yeah, like the repercussion is great. Like it's cloudy, we're in murky waters when it comes to that.
The series was really good. I really did like the ending. Oh, the ending that made me cry too. I was at work watching the last one on my lunch, and my coworkers looking at me. They're like, "Are you crying?" I was like, "Stop! I'm watching the end of Beckham."
Yeah.
But it was. We always talk about in movies and television the music choice of shows and that how it will heighten emotion sometimes. And I thought it was really cool because they played the Turtles Happy Together at the
Yeah.
very last, and it was just kind of showing the family and him and Victoria dancing and just how love they were. And they said like, out of all this, like we're happy like together. And then it shows him like watching the thing and it kind of he looks at the camera like, I wonder what's next kind of thing. And it was just like one of those songs too that was just like it's an ending, but it's like there's more to come.
Right.
So it was just like I was just like, oh my gosh, it's so good.
Yeah.
And then over the credits, you see him practicing with one of the players, and it's reminiscent of his dad playing with him. And it's funny because he's like, "Oh, I'm not your dad, but I do have a team. I do have so many trophies, so no pressure."
Yeah.
But I was
Yeah.
just like, "Oh my gosh, that was so beautiful!" Another like full circle moment of dad teaching him, and now he's teaching young players too. I was just like, "Oh, like they couldn't have ended it any better." And
Yeah.
I was like, "Good job, Fisher Stevens. Like you really did well on this."
Truly, because it felt good to end so with such a heavy emphasis on the family being together. Like I love that. I also love how they strategically did not show the older two children's partners, even though you could kind of catch that they were there. Like a just in case.
Yeah.
Because there is like rumors about drama between Victoria and Nicola, Brooklyn's daughter. I don't know how true they are. I don't think any of it's been like vetted or substantiated in any way, shape, or form, but those rumors do exist.
Yeah. It was such a great series, and I'm so glad it exists now, and I encourage people to watch it, especially just to learn about like what some of these athletes go through and stuff. I mean, his was a special case, but I think a lot of it, other athletes do have to deal with that.
I think it really also does challenge what we think about professional sports in general. Like football's a completely different category. American football's a completely different category. They have their own separate set of issues. But I think when there is a couple that sort of defies the stereotype that exists, like this is a really good example of that. This is a really good example of a couple trying to sort of break out of what is prescribed for a soccer family.
They're great. I love them. They're awesome.
Their love is so endearing. It's so endearing. They're
so beautiful.
Yeah, you're just like, stop being so charming. I hate it, but I love it. Like,
I'm just waiting for Victoria to go on tour with Spice Girls reunion.
Do you think she will? Are they planning to do that?
I heard rumors that Spice Girls wanted to, but it's like
Victoria's not.
I don't know. I'm sure she would. I feel like
maybe it's her time now that Bex is retired a little bit ish, retired-ish. Mario, thank you so much for joining us yet again for another pop culture-ish topic. Can you please tell our friends where they can find you and support your work and keep up with all the things that you are doing?
You can find me on Instagram at Movies with Mr. Mario, where I review movies and television shows I'm watching and share the latest pop culture news. And look out for my review of Beckham coming up soon. Well, thank you, Julie. It's always a pleasure talking with you.
Same. And friends, I'm going to link everything in the show notes. I don't know why you aren't following Mario and all of his reviews. He recently posted like his favorite horror movies, and it is a comprehensive list of shit I will never watch.
So don't come to Julia for spooky content.
No, that is not my job. That's why you follow Mario. I don't want none of that. I loved this docu-series so much, and a lot of it is because the Beckhams were willing to be vulnerable and relive some pretty trying times. I want to make a correction. I said Brooklyn's daughter when I meant wife, and in regards to the paparazzi, it's in episode 2. Fisher Stevens asks Emin and James, the photographers who frequently photographed David and Victoria, if they ever felt guilty sometimes for taking pictures of the Beckham's kids. And the response was, quote, "You wouldn't do it now. Times have changed," end quote. Times have changed, but also seemingly have gotten worse. While the Beckhams didn't come out of the celebrity unscathed, their family is strong, and it really is wonderful to see them be unapologetic about loving their kids and each other. And frankly, the trash is still coming for Victoria because now she is a mother-in-law and her relationship with her daughter-in-law is rumored to be contentious. But at the same time, there's a lot of speculation, and even though, quote, times have changed, it still feels very negative and very gross towards the mother-in-law, daughter-in-law relationship. I also can't stop thinking about how the photographers feel now, like in their role in contributing to the horrific media coverage of celebrities, specifically women, that was the 1990s and early 2000s. Photographers don't always have control over the language that's printed around what they submit and get paid for. At the same time, their images are what we look at, are what we use to speculate things. I want to thank Mario again for coming on to discuss this docu-series. I highly recommend it, and Mario's review is now up on Instagram. You can find him at Movies with Mr. Mario or click the link in our show notes. Pop Culture Makes Me Jealous is written and edited by me, your host, and if you're new around here, I am a biracial writer and podcast host based in California. When I'm not facilitating the Jelly Pops book club or recording this podcast or painting greeting cards, I'm teetering on existential dread and trying to convince my dog to snuggle me. And you're probably thinking, why are you telling us you're biracial? It's a huge part of my identity that I'm working through every single day. You can find me on Instagram or TikTok at the Julia Washington. And if you can't get enough of this show, you can join us on Patreon, patreon.com/Julia Washington. You can join a paid tier and get bonus content like bonus episodes, TV or movie reviews, and a bi-monthly pop culture social hour. Or you can just join our community and get some pretty cool free shit too, but it's not as frequent as the paid tiers. If you've enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you shared it with someone who might enjoy it too. If you post on socials that you're listening, you can tag me and tag the show if you want, or you can just be a secret lurker and just share it with everyone you know on the down low. Thanks for tuning in, y'all. Until next time.